So I think we're ready to get started.
Great.
All right, super.
I am going to share my screen to kick us off. And you should be able to see this, right, Matt? Right, Patrick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it. Super.
All right, so welcome everybody. We're back in August for the return of the Remote Game Studio webinars. And we're joined today with special guest Matthew Watt, who's development director for the upcoming, actually already soft launched apparently, but upcoming Avatar Pandora Rising mobile game. Thanks, Matt.
John. Great to be here.
Cool. And Patrick Pham is also with us today, CEO of Favro, also co-founder of Favro. Good to see you, Patrick. So again, just as we've done in the past, or the past couple, we're going to be presenting the webinar is being driven out of Favro. It seemed to work great in the past, so we're going to keep doing it. So I'm going to open up here a little preview of what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to open up the agenda. And we're going to start with, this is a Favro timeline, by the way. We're going to start with just a quick introduction, more a little bit in depth of our speakers, especially Matt. Patrick's going to talk us through kind of the thinking, the vision behind Favro. Then we'll have a Q&A session, interview session. Patrick's going to be speaking with Matthew about the transition that he's experienced to remote. Any insights he can offer there are going to be greatly appreciated. Then I'm going to take over and we're going to be talking about kind of the core of the presentation, the Remote Game Studio, and the challenges involved, some of the solutions that we found that some of the best game studios in the world have adopted to handle working remote. And of course, talk about the tools and also the methods, the process that work best for remote game studio development. Then I'm briefly going to talk about a partnership that my company, Broadcove Insights, and Favro have put together to quickly bring people up to speed working remotely. Maybe they've had challenges, maybe it hasn't been as smooth as they thought it was going to be or hoped it would be, and making the transition more smooth with this Favro Remote Game Studio Quick Start. Then we'll just open it up to general Q&A. So to get things started, here are today's speakers. Again, Patrick Pham, CEO and co-founder of Favro. Myself, I'm an Agile coach for Broadcove Insights. And again, our very special guest, Matthew Watt. So Patrick, please take it away.
Thanks, John. And one side note before starting here. I remember in the super early days of Favro, I wanted to go somewhere and have a little bit of vacation. And in the life of an entrepreneur and CEO, I mean, a lot of vacation days is typically not something you have a lot of. So the few you can take, you really appreciate. What happened then was that I was at a very small island outside of Africa, and it was actually a great test because with the whole idea with Favro in the first place was to create an enterprise grade platform with a gamer grade experience. So a lot of the things I had to do with the performance of it was perfect to test out of a very shaky Wi-Fi out of that little island. And today we actually have a very similar situation. So today it's kind of like we're doing the same thing here now with Zoom. So we'll see if that works out. I'm joining in from Italy today. The other kind of core ideas that we had when we started Favro, some of you might have met me before or seen me before in the position of being co-founder and back then CEO of another company called Hamsoft that we sold in 2017 and to focus fully on Favro. And we took with us a lot of experiences from being thought leaders in the Agile community, and really the core idea of Favro was that we wanted to bring the Agile way of working to any kind of team. So not just software developers, but marketing, sales, executive leadership, etc. And I'm super happy that we've seen that very clearly with our customers, that it is definitely not just product development. It is across the whole board. that was really the idea from the very start. And another thing that was important for us, and which is very topical, especially this summer, was things around data governance, security, so forth. We didn't anticipate when we launched Favro in 2016 that GDPR and the court case that happened this summer, just a few weeks ago, and I was just trying to figure out how to deal with that. These kind of questions was going to be that important and that complicated for many to deal with. And since our customers typically are quite big companies, enterprises, we need to be very good at living up to those kind of demands to allow our clients to live up to those kind of things. So, so basically, when I say enterprise platform, that is something that has shown to be important from a lot of different perspectives. But anyways, one of the really cool things with doing this journey with Favro is that I think I can safely say that the kind of customers that we attract are very forward-thinking teams, and with very forward-thinking teams, you tend to meet some really cool people. So I'm super happy to have Matt here today because this is an example. We met in LA, quite early in the journey of Favro, and now when we do this series, when we invite people from Favro clients to join this conversation, live right now, and we have been having a ton of people watching these webinars, the recording of them afterwards. So this summer has been really great for that too. So anyways, having that opportunity to meet people like you, Matt, has been truly inspiring. But that's basically the backstory to how we met. But what I think would be really great here is if you could just kind of give us your story. How did you get into the industry and to where you are today, and working on the cool stuff that we see in your background.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is our game, Pandora Rising. Yeah, thank you for having me here today, Patrick and John. Really great to be here talking about game development with you. These are truly unprecedented times. I think I've faced some of the most interesting and unique challenges of my career in the last 6 months, transitioning a massive development team to working remotely and still managing to support a soft launched game, a live game with our release cadence and stuff. So a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about here. A little bit on my background, I have a film and television production degree from USC. So working on Avatar is kind of a realization of a dream I had when I was much younger, to be connected to the film industry and get to work with our partners at Lightstorm on this incredible IP. I got started at Electronic Arts doing esports broadcasting, television production for the esports component of the Command & Conquer franchise. And then I joined the development team, and a lot of that core development team is actually still working with us today on Pandora Rising. We've worked through several different companies along the way. And our journey has taken us from PC games to console games to Facebook games and now mobile games. And often in the strategy genre. So that's a little bit about how we got to where we are.
And you mentioned your background from film, and as long as I've been in this industry, we always have had this conversation around the convergence, the overlap between these industries. Can you what's your take on the current state of the film industry versus the game industry, and convergence, and kind of how this has been developing over time? Because you must have also seen change if you just look at the last 5 years or longer.
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot. I guess the way I would describe it is games used to be these $60 experiences where you're driving to get to a gold master and then you release it. And that's kind of like what films have always been as well. Sort of an auteur experience, right? Where there's a single vision holder or a team's vision that is realized and then only released to customers when it's finished. Games now have gotten to these live services modes now, which is very different, where now we have this direct and daily relationship with our players, where we build the game and we release it, sure, but we're really trying to build a community that can last for years with online games. And we hope that our players love our games, and then we collect their feedback and we iterate and we release new content, and really the players are a part of the journey. And I think that that is where the film and television industry is headed as well, if you look at the streaming services, you know, because in the past, these film companies, they had to rely on things like Nielsen ratings or critical scores like Rotten Tomatoes to try and get any sort of feeling as to what's working and what's not working. But now with streaming, they also are able to have this direct and daily relationship with their customers. They're able to see which shows they like, and if they like this show, will they like that show, and did they turn off at exactly minute 17 of this episode, and why was that? You know, that creates a lot of problems as well. You could get, in the gaming space too, you can get too obsessed with the data. You could have a data-driven design, has some negative connotations to it as well. But it's just a really interesting transformation that I think is happening in both industries right now.
So, you know, this question is a little bit fluffy, but it's something I've been thinking quite a bit about recently. Today, the game industry is bigger than the movie industry and the music industries, you know, combined. And I have a feeling that you know, the mainstream, you know, hasn't really understood that yet. You know, the media hasn't understood that yet. It hasn't, you know, sunk in. But I also think that we in the industry haven't really realized that yet. You know, so in terms of, you know, there's also a lot of, you know, power that comes with that. You know, there's a lot of, you know, IPs being developed, you know, today that are really coming from the game industry rather than film as well. So, and you know, you're obviously sitting in very much, you know, the crossroads of, you know, all of this. Let's put it, maybe teething problems is probably the wrong term, but, you know, what is your view on, you know, some of them, let's say, you know, immaturities that we might have in the game industry, you know, where we haven't, you know, fully realized how big we are, and you know, things that you predict will change, you know, a lot, you know, the coming 5 years. So if we were just kind of now looking back, you know, if you also can look forward, you know, what do you see?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think some of that comes with like being newcomers, you know, like film and television have been around for decades, and gaming is only just now starting, and music as well. Gaming is only just now starting to find its footing. We don't have as many, you know, quote, celebrities in the gaming world yet that we've had over the multiple decades of film and music. It's still becoming a part of the cultural zeitgeist in a way that film and music have already long established. So yeah, we'll have to see where that's going. I do think that games are becoming more and more mainstream. I love what Fortnite has been doing with, you know, holding a concert in that game or debuting a movie clip in the world of Fortnite to sort of bring all these things together. I think seeing more and more things like that could be a big part of it. When you make a game, you're building, you know, a world, and it's a place that people can visit and spend time in and become fans of and obsess over. You know, Riot Games has done an excellent job of this with the whole League of Legends universe, their world, and all the other games and stories that exist in it. So yeah, I think we're just getting started, and it's only getting bigger for sure.
So if we zoom in a little bit more on the producer's perspective here, what's the biggest changes in really, let's say, production practices that you have seen, you know, over the last couple of years? And obviously, you know, one place where, you know, we will end up in this conversation is with remote work, you know, going from kind of opportunity driven to really necessity driven now. So we're definitely going to go into that topic as well. But you know, if you look a little bit broader, you know, how was it, you know, being a producer, and what were the kind of, you know, the challenges you were tackling then that have, you know, maybe more, you know, changed now over time?
Yeah, I don't know if this just relates to my experience in the companies I've worked at or the larger industry, but one trend that I've observed over the last several years is a shift to empowering teams more, to having it be less about a single leader at the top of a project and more about, when we spin up a new feature on our games, we identify a creative lead and a delivery lead for that feature, a project manager type. And we give those two individuals a tremendous amount of autonomy to work with the game leads, come up with their design, schedule it out, build it, play test it, check it into our mainline branch and develop and release it. And I have just observed that, at least on our teams over the past several years, we've been pushing that power and that ownership lower and lower in the project. And it's been leading to some incredible results, because when people feel empowered and able to take control of their own features, their own development timelines, they can make some really cool stuff, and that passion really comes through. So that's one trend that we were seeing, before and even after the whole coronavirus thing. Have you noticed that as well in some of your other, clients in other areas of gaming?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and that's a very agile concept too, the whole team empowerment, self-management, getting the teams to think, and I've been doing this ever since my production days, of getting the teams to feel more like game developers than just their individual discipline.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part of it for sure.
So, doubling down then on the remote, work part. I mean, what, if you would create, a bit of a playbook on the fly here, and sit down with the studio which is struggling, or it's just getting started, and they need to work in a remote first way. I mean, what's your learnings so far, both before the coronavirus, but obviously also now, during these times?
Yeah, it kind of falls into two categories, and you start with the first one. The first one is just the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling. That's like, what tools are we going to use? What meetings are we going to keep? What new meetings do we need to establish? What's our review process going to look like? And that stuff's really important to figure out and share and standardize with your team. And I could talk about that, but I think a lot of that's pretty common knowledge at this point. The thing that's been very interesting for me and our teams is kind of the softer skills, the stuff around the edges of working remote that's actually really challenging, that maybe people don't think about as much. Things like making sure that everybody has a webcam so that you can see people's faces, like the importance of being able to understand emotion or context through seeing someone's eyes, and really encouraging people to turn on their cameras when they're presenting, or have their cameras on in one-on-ones. Maybe you don't need it on in a team meeting. Other things too, like etiquette within Slack or other project manager or other communication tools that you use. It's much more important when you're remote, if somebody asks you a question, to just send a quick reply and just say, I don't, I'll get back to you, or I'm looking into this. Just acknowledge, receipt of these things. There's so much that we took for granted when we were face to face. That's just these subtle communications that people just do without even realizing it, whether it's, I need a quick answer, so I'll just walk up to someone's desk and get the answer. And now you can't do that. And so you hope that you'll get the quick answer by just pinging them in your chat system, but maybe they have their notifications muted or whatever. Little things like that that get in the way of effective communications and working together. And then I guess the final piece of advice is just having your presence be understood, whether it's like, at the start of your day, just typing into your team chat channel, good morning, just so that people know, oh, okay, so Matt's online now. And when you're signing off, say, good night. Little things like that make a big difference, because you would do that in the office as well. You would see that Matt has walked into the office. You'd see me set down my bag, grab my coffee, and you don't get some of that stuff now. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we, I think we do a lot of things right with this at Favro, but that last thing we talked about now, we aren't doing. So I'll probably start doing that now.
Yeah.
So the from your from the producer point of view, could you touch a bit upon the kind of challenges and some advice you have when leading a team, that is working with external IP, because this is something that obviously we've been doing for a long time in this industry, and that comes with a couple of different challenges that are a little bit unique to those kind of those games, and I think you are in a great position to share some best practices around that.
Yeah, well, the first piece of advice in working with a major IP gets back to your earlier point about how big games are and what a great opportunity this could be. With a lot of IPs, if you're working on a game, that game actually has, in many cases, more earnings potential than even the original IP, if it's a mid-tier movie or a television show or something like that. And a lot of times these licensors, they don't understand that. So I think it really starts with an education campaign for your licensor, showing them what you're trying to do, what your targets are, how big this can really be, and how it can reach new audiences for them to kind of make them believers and get them in your corner. Thankfully, our partners on Avatar at Lightstorm really understand this and are very bought into to gaming like ours. So that's one piece of it. And then another piece is just making sure that your team puts in the time and energy to become great brand stewards. Like really understand what's important about this IP to the IP holders and to the creatives that originated it, that made this, and make sure that every piece of art that you make, every design decision that you make is true to their brand, because you're just the steward. They created it, it's their thing, and you want to take excellent care of it and bring it to new customers, new markets. You've been using Favro for a while, and do you have a few examples of very specific challenges in production that you addressed with Favro? Yeah, actually relating to our licensor, we use Favro for our approvals process, and we actually introduced Favro to the team at Fox, now Disney, because we were doing our approvals through Favro with them, and they've since expanded it, and they're handling all of their approvals with all of their license teams through Favro, which is great. It's a really useful tool for us because when you create a card, you can attach assets to it. They show up in a preview. It's very simple to drag things around, add comments, tag people, and get email alerts. It's something that people who don't really understand project management tools or don't want to go deep on understanding project management tools can just see this quick visualization and understand how to engage with it. It's got version history and markups and things like that we use as well.
Awesome. I think that might be a good segue here to John, and it would be great. Stick around. We'll see if we have some more questions coming up, and we'll address that also by the end. Again, truly great having you as a special guest today, and hopefully this Corona passes. So even though it's nice that we can meet in this way and we can collaborate in this way, it's always nice to see in person as well.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick.
Thanks. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you very much, Matt. Very well said. I mean, some of the things that you just discussed there, huge insights, and it makes me miss game development proper.
I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Really appreciate everything you had to say there. So Matt and I, just to give a little bit more backstory on myself, I used to travel the world with Handsoft, and then for a time with Favro as well. Now I'm independent as an Agile coach, but Matt and I met when we were both living in San Francisco, and we met while he was at Zynga, and very much appreciated. I spent a lot of time at Zynga, and every time I went to visit Matt, he was fully engaged in the process, and he was fully engaged in that whole idea of continuous improvement, always wanting the team himself, Zynga as a whole, to be better. And I can just hear from speaking with you today that's obviously been a continuing theme with you. So again, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me just share my screen once more. And continuing on again in Favro, one of the first things that I want everybody to realize who are maybe seeing Favro for the first time, and again, thanks for joining, is that one of the things that really differentiates Favro from other planning, collaboration tools, agile tools, is that you can have multiple boards. These could be Kanban boards. These could be any type of board you like, in a single collection. Okay, and you can also have, as we'll see as we go through this, you can also have multiple backlogs, as you see here. So if you're a large game and you have multiple backlogs, maybe an art asset backlog, multiple feature backlogs, you're a producer, you can literally see everything at a glance in a single collection or a single screen, what Favro calls a collection. And these are live boards backlogs that can exist in multiple places across multiple team level collections. So just think about it. If you're a producer, like Matt is, essentially development director, this is a one-stop shop. You don't have to jump around through a bunch of different collections to find what you're looking for. And I think that's the number one, if you take anything away from this webinar from a tools perspective, it's that. You can literally drive the entire process, or at least oversee and align the entire process from a single screen collection, which you just can't do in any other planning and collaboration tool. So another thing that I want to point out is that if you click on any one of these cards, I'm going to share this particular collection, this remote game studio webinar with the date on it collection. I'm going to make it public, which is something you can do in Favro. I'm going to share it out to all the attendees, all the people who are registered. And you can click any one of these cards and say, Matt Ott, for example, I've got a link in here to his LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with him in the future. But pretty much every single one of these cards in this particular collection are clickable, and there's going to be links, there's going to be articles, there's going to be examples of everything that I'm talking about. So to get to the core, the meat of the presentation, I just want to open up this board, and here, some of the inspiration for both Patrick and I, when this whole, again, as Patrick said, necessity driven instead of opportunity driven move to remote happened. I mean, it's a light speed jump forward, both from digital transformation and also the remote transformation. And I hope also from an agile transformation standpoint, because of what's happened. And if there's anything good to take away from it, I hope it's those things. And somebody who really summed it up early on, Martin Mikos, CEO at HackerOne, who also happens to be a Favro investor, is this quote that he wrote into an open letter, essentially to the world, saying the Industrial Revolution brought us the idea that work is a place different from home, and that work is done in physical proximity of many other people. It is the idea of the joint workplace that is the anomaly. Working from home is natural. So you may not agree with that completely, you may agree with it somewhat, but the polls, at least the polls that I've been reading, are absolutely clear. People appreciate at least the flexibility of working remotely. And things have changed, obviously, since the Industrial Revolution. We're not working in factories, right? We're hopefully, from a game development standpoint, right? You want to be able to have that flexibility, that autonomy at the team level. And working from home is just one other step in that direction. Working remotely is just another step in that direction. And I think a big reason for that is this other quote from Jason Fried and David Hansen, the authors of this book, excellent book, Remote, which was written way back in 2013. They're the co-founders of Signal 31, which are the guys who make Basecamp. But they said in this book, offices have become interruption factories. The ability to be alone with your thoughts is, in fact, one of the key advantages of working remotely. And I absolutely agree with that. From working in open plan offices and studios, in my previous career as a game producer, and even as an agile coach, I've seen this absolutely be the case, where there's a lot of benefits to being co-located, but in some regards, benefits are mitigated by the fact that offices truly have become interruption factories. It's great to be able to impromptu ask people to do things, but if you're sitting in an open plan office, those interruptions are almost never ending, and you can't control them, you can't turn them off. The interruptions at home, for the most part, you do have control over, but the ones in an office, you don't. So some of the benefits, and a lot of these benefits are obvious, right? So lower overhead. If you're a game studio, especially a game studio first starting out, and a lot of game studios have been remote and distributed from the very beginning. Another Favro customer Unknown Worlds, they've been remote and distributed since day one. And bigger studios that were co-located in the past are now realizing some of the benefits of this. And some of these are obvious, right? Hugely reduced costs. If you don't have office space or reduced office space, it's going to save a ton of money, right? I've written this article, Run Your Entire Game Studio in a Single Tool. And the idea being that you can literally have Favro, which it sounds like in Matt's cases, to a certain extent at least, become the case, as well as other game studio customers of Favro, that they're literally replacing the office or that co-location with a tool, with Favro. And Favro becomes that single source of truth. It becomes the place where you go instead of going to somebody's desk. It's where you go to ask somebody a question related to the work, right? So we'll get to it in a second. Slack is great for those ad hoc conversations, but it's not great at conversations related to the work and context to the work. So another side effect of working remotely, and another benefit of working remotely, is the best talent. I mean, you're not limited to a talent pool local to wherever your physical studio happens to be located. Another cost savings too. If you want to recruit talent from other places in the world, you don't have to pay to relocate them. But you truly open the doors to the best people regardless of location. And just trying to get that across here, you can build tables and what are kind of called content cards in Favro. You can add images here, you can add checklists, you can collaborate in real time just like you would in a Google Doc. You can also link to other boards, you can link to other backlogs, other collections directly on the cards like I'm doing here. And if I look at this example related to this particular topic, the best talent, here's an example of another way to use Favro, not just for game development teams or art teams, but also, again, as Patrick said, to run your entire studio, including HR, including recruiting, including live ops or even finance, whatever the case may be.
Well, Patrick and John, I really hope you guys get the job. Looks like you're still pretty early in the process, though.
I know. I hope I at least pass the screening call. But congratulations to Jim for getting hired. So another, obvious, maybe not so obvious side effect actually, along with talent, is diversity. And we had an excellent webinar, special guest in one of our previous webinars with Sigerlina, Ingvar's daughter, who this is kind of a passion for her, talking about diversity in the workplace and specifically in game development, not just from a gender basis, but also from a location basis, an ethnicity basis. The concept being, and Matt, you alluded to this, right? You don't make games just for a particular demographic anymore, the way it used to be. You don't make hardcore real-time strategy games for a very specific demographic. You're making games that you want to appeal, that you actually want to become a community, as you said, for the entire world, right? And to get that input, that diverse input, is so important when you're making products, when you're making services, that the intended customer is everyone. Happier teams, and this is kind of a passion for me. I mean, as much as I liked making video games, I saw a lot of unhappy teams. I saw a lot of crunch. I saw a lot of things that really I saw that could be improved. And I truly believe that working remotely, and again, as a lot of the polls would say, at least 54% of the people like working remotely and would prefer not to go back to an office or a studio full time, that it definitely led to happier individuals, that leads to happier teams, that leads to, as it says here, increased creativity and productivity. And that's just been proven time and time again. And as an Agile coach, a big focus of mine is to try to improve that overall team happiness through retrospectives, through Kaizen, whatever the case may be. And I have an example of this here that you can click on later in an article as well, when I share this collection out to you. And a big reason for that happiness, no commuting, right? I mean, in LA and a lot of the places where game studios exist, a lot of traffic. And the average, not even in some of the larger metro areas, but the average across the entire country in the US is 300 to 4 hours per year of commute time. And working remotely, you get all that back instantly, right? And that's a huge contributor to the happiness factor, getting back that quality of life that you may have been missing when you're working in a co-located studio. Some of the challenges. So these are those benefits, some of the challenges. Studio culture, and a lot of people say, well, we're going to lose our studio culture in this move to remote. And as Matt and I were talking about prior to the webinar actually even starting, we were talking about kind of remote retreats or virtual retreats. And you gave me that great example, Matt, of a company, maybe it was a game studio, that had sent out picnic baskets to all of their employees and said, go outside, you know, if you have Wi-Fi, great, get online and we'll have a virtual company picnic. And I think that's awesome, doing things like that. There's so many different ways, creative ways to maintain culture. But one of the biggest insights that I've had overall with culture, corporate culture, studio culture, is that moving to remote is going to amplify both things. It's going to amplify your strengths, and it's certainly going to amplify your weaknesses. If you had a command and control studio, if you had this kind of, we're going to tell you what to do and how to do it essentially type of mindset, and you don't have a lot of trust, you don't have a lot of autonomy, that's just not going to work in the move to remote. And I think one of the reasons why, you know, your studio, Matt, moving to remote has worked so well is you've had this practice even before the pandemic of empowering teams, you know, and that's what it's all about. Making people feel more empowered, is going to lead to better engagement, higher passion, better quality products, better games. And the idea here is that instead of this command and control mindset, you have to move to this agile remote first studio mindset, which is all about that autonomy. It's all about the trust, and it's all about responding to change, which there's a ton of that lately, obviously. And to help with the move to remote, there's a couple articles here on this card. We put together a remote work playbook, which has been getting a ton of traffic, a ton of likes. It's awesome that people are so into this. And also specifically from a culture standpoint, we've been doing this at Favro. And they've even been including me, even though I'm a contractor for Favro, these Favro after-work gaming events. So kind of, you know, Favro uses Favro to do the work, and Favro uses maybe Discord. We've set up a Discord server to do the after-work gaming, and it's kind of that separation between work. We're in Favro and Slack, and when we go to play games, we're in Discord and, you know, whatever game we happen to be playing that night. And it's super fun, and it creates that separation between we're at the studio, we're at work, or we're actually having a good time. And it's another good creative way to maintain that culture. As an Agile coach and now becoming kind of a remote work expert in this field is, are people working? And this is a question that I received even before the move to remote, but for people who are stuck in this kind of command and control mindset, it's been exacerbated by the move to remote. And one of the allegories that we use in Agile is keep your eyes on the baton, not the runner, right? If you're running a relay race, it's that baton getting around the track 4 times it's winning the race. It's not the individual runners. They're doing it as a team. So the translation is keep your eyes on the actual flow of value, what it is you're actually delivering to your customers, delivering to your players, instead of spending so much time worrying about, you know, is so-and-so busy? Does so-and-so not have enough to do? Those are also considerations, but the idea is if the value is flowing, then don't worry so much about the actual individual contributors and whether they're busy or not. And there's a whole bunch of different aspects to that. You have to have Slack in your system in order to optimize the system. List goes on and on. You don't want to be tracking activity and tasks, which is a lot of people in this move to remote has been their gut instinct. We need to, in order to track people, you know, to see if they're working, we need to see how many tasks they're completing or actually being able to track their activity online, which is obviously going to be a big, you know, motivation killer. Again, track that kind of flow of value across not individuals, but across your teams and teams of teams. Kind of a quick example of this I have here. I'll click on this link. Say you have a game app that supports maybe a bigger game, whether it's console or PC. And that app team might be a relatively small team, cross-functional team, but they're working in this particular collection. And you can turn things on to track that flow of value, like time on board, time on column, to see if something's getting stuck. Is something stuck in test? Is something stuck in progress? As often was the case when I was a producer, is something stuck in producer review? Whatever the case may be, but you're able to track that in real time. Are things actually flowing from start to finish? That whole idea in Kanban, at least, of focusing on finishing, not starting a lot of things. And charts, this all comes for free in Favro. There's the 3 different views, the Kanban view, a sheets view, a timeline view, but there's also built-in charts. So you could look at a burn down chart for this team, a cumulative flow chart, or a control chart for this team, all tracking, again, that flow of value. It may look something like this with the predicted velocity out into the future. And not tracking individuals, are they busy or not, but rather how quickly are things getting from start to finish. Another big one, too many meetings. And this is an easy one, right? A big reason for the too many meetings are a symptom. And the real problem is that there's a lack of real direction, a lack of clear goals. There's probably a lack of cadence at the studio. You can eliminate so many meetings with a tool like Favro. People don't have to ask a lot of the questions that would require a meeting, maybe an ad hoc meeting even, because they can see it. They can go to Favro, they can communicate in real time, they can collaborate in real time, they can see the flow of the actual art assets or game mechanics, whatever the case may be, in real time. And that answers so many questions in and of themselves. But even above and beyond that, if you establish just a regular cadence of meetings above and beyond the daily stand-up, the daily scrum, whatever you're calling it, but those sync points, not just at the team level, but across the entire studio, it's going to give everybody that clear sense of direction, hopefully clear goals are being set, and it's going to reduce a lot of the unknowns that are causing these too many meetings that you're trying to essentially replicate the co-location, which you don't have anymore. Collaboration and innovation, that's, as Matt pointed out, it is harder to collaborate probably when you're not co-located. It might even be tougher to innovate, but it's certainly possible. And some teams have learned that they can actually do it better remotely. I have an example here, which you can look at later, of an innovation process pipeline in Favro, where you're actually taking these new ideas and turning them into products in a very kind of more detailed way, taking that idea generation and innovation to the next level, as opposed to somebody had an idea and it might get lost somewhere. This is a way to track that flow of ideas, just as you track a new art asset. I also have an example here of cross-team collaboration in Favro. And this would be a feature development team. Say they're working in the sprint board, it's gotten to test, and the guy, QA analyst, embedded QA analyst, is doing the testing, realizes, I can't really do a proper test of this take cover behind objects gameplay mechanic that's being developed because I don't have the appropriate maybe block model to test it on. So he would just maybe move this to blocked like this. It automatically assigns maybe the scrum master or the team lead, somebody to help unblock this particular gameplay mechanic. And that person may then, since you can have other teams' boards, real live boards in the same collection as your own, you could maybe drag that same card, because cards can exist in multiple places in Favro, which is another unique feature, capability in the tool. They could just take this and drag it from blocked over to this first column in this internal art asset team's Kanban or art asset pipeline. And you can see that this same card now exists in both places. It also originated in a backlog, and via relations, you're able to track everywhere that it exists. So then it would then maybe become, this particular art team could maybe swarm this particular art asset. They'd open up the card, they'd see the conversation. Again, that conversation happened in context to the work. So somebody doesn't have to go to Slack and try to figure out what happened. and what decision was made or what's missing, what's causing this block. All of that conversation is taking place right here on the card. They can make notes saying, this is exactly what I need. This is why it's blocked. I need a block model to hide behind, something that simple. And then they can make this maybe their #1 priority thing that they move through the art asset pipeline just to get that model to the point where it needs to be to do the testing. Okay, so moving on to some of the solutions. So remote first culture. And again, as I said, these are pretty simple. You have to establish a culture of trust and accountability if you didn't have it already. And from a leadership standpoint, leaders have to think differently. And again, this is a very agile concept, this whole idea of servant leadership, where leaders are really just there to pass along the intent, the goals, the objective, the impact they want those objectives to make, and then clear the way and empower their teams to actually make it happen. And as Matt alluded to, as Matt actually said, you're going to get amazing results when you operate this way, as opposed to saying, this is what I want, and this is exactly how it has to look, right? Let them take ownership, give the intent, and let the teams actually figure out how to meet that intent, how to meet that goal. And some of the results are just going to be, just magical, really. And Matt also talked about this whole idea of you can't show up anymore. There's no studio to show up to. So I love what you said, Matt, about checking in the morning, just saying good morning, saying good night when you're shutting down, when you're logging off, essentially. But above and beyond that, how you show up to the studio now is a focus on adding value. And it's this whole idea of I really want to be empowered to the point where I feel more, hopefully you have more of a entrepreneurial mindset or more of a business owner or game studio kind of founder mindset as opposed to an employee mindset. And if you adopt that type of mindset, that's going to certainly show that you're showing up, that you've taken responsibility, you've taken accountability, and you're really taking it to the next level, as opposed to I'm just sitting here waiting for somebody to tell me what to do. Again, from a kind of process standpoint, right? So you can look at it as 3 things: culture, process, and tools. From a process standpoint, if you weren't agile before, working in an agile way, then now's definitely the time for agile. It's all about embracing uncertainty, embracing change, responding to change, being adaptable, especially when you're working on live games like Matt is. That's already embedded in the process, but you've added the extra component of now working remotely and all of the change and adaptability that comes along with that. So instead of just agility at the team level, you've got to think studio-wide agility. Everybody has to be agile, from HR to finance to publishing. The entire organization has to be working in an agile way, and you have to have alignment across all of those different teams and all of those different departments working in that agile way. And Favro is built to actually make that happen, to facilitate that. Again, the cadence, right? If you have an established cadence, both short-term and long-term, whether it's sprints, 2 weeks, maybe long-term release cadence, maybe, or at least a milestone cadence every month, this is what our focus is. And you have maybe a show and tell, not just at the team level, but the entire studio on a 2-week basis or every 4-week basis. Establishing that cadence is now more important than ever with the move to remote. We already kind of touched on this, but tracking that flow of value at the team level, but also at the overall studio level, which you can do in Favro. And then the idea of, we want to kind of track that flow, not from an activity standpoint, but an actual, what are we actually delivering to the customer? And when you're in a live ops, when you're in a live services type of environment, that can happen so much faster, and you can get that feedback so much faster. And you can actually use this whole idea of value metrics to see, are we delivering valuable content to our players, which again is something that you can do in Favro. And then, of course, tools, Zoom, obvious one. Everybody's using Zoom. We're on Zoom right now for this webinar. Great for synchronous meetings, great for webinars, great for things like this. Slack, awesome for text-based communications, asynchronous, just for that general discussion, those general check-ins. But Favro can really become, as it has for a lot of game studios, become that single source of truth. So having all of those communications that you would maybe do in Slack, if it's related to the work, it's related to an art asset, if it's related to a gameplay mechanic, if it's related to a live ops campaign, having those conversations instead of in Slack, having them in Favro, it's going to be much easier to track. It's going to be much easier to look back and for people to find how are those decisions made. It's also where all your planning is going to happen, hopefully all of your collaboration, and you're going to be able to track that flow. I have another quick example here, created in maybe an art director art dashboard. So again, using the power that Favro can have multiple team boards and backlogs in a single screen collection. And I'll minimize this user interface here. Here we have a art master backlog, and it's been broken down simply into internal and external assets. And we have also just released bundles of weapons and characters, keeping it simple here, both internal and external, and trying to get across the point that you can track at multiple levels. So we can track each one of these content drops for maybe characters, weapons, cars, environment props. We can track here at a high level, right? So the selected in progress review like this, and you can see those here via relations in the backlog where everything is at from a high level, and also the individual asset level. But you can also, of course, track at the individual art asset level. And I can say, okay, character agent 8, that's the next highest priority thing that we need to be working on. We'll move that into selected, and that can go through that art asset pipeline. And you being that art director, art lead, whatever the case may be, are able to track that by looking at the board, but you can also track it directly from the backlog, again, thanks to the power of these relations. And you can do the same thing for your external art asset team. If you're using outsourcing external art creation, again, super easy. It actually makes it look like it's more a part of your internal team. And now that everybody's remote, there's not as much of a difference between external outsourcing and internal teams anyway. So you might as well have that all, as you can see here, in a single art dashboard collection, be able to track everything in a single place. All right, wrapping this up, as well as, well, actually Matt is included in this. Before the pandemic and when I was traveling a lot more than I am now, Favro had me do this great project where I went out and interviewed some of the best producers, development directors in the game industry. And here's Matt's interview. We also have other people who participated, and you can come to this resource here, learn.favro.com, and see all of these success stories of game developers using Favro. Now, as I mentioned when we were looking at the agenda, myself, Barcode Insights, and Favro have put together a partnership to help studios make this move to remote more smooth. If they're struggling with the communication, with the collaboration, that can, of course, always be improved. And to help with that transition, we put together this 3-day Favro Remote Game Studio Quick Start. There's also a 5-day version, but some people gave me feedback that they actually needed to start faster than in 5 days. So now there's a 3-day version. If you click on this here, you can see everything that's included, including a big benefit right off the top. It's a 25% Favro annual discount. We also we sit with you and the teams, of course, remotely, figuring out exactly how your studio is set up. We do all the design configuration. We really think it through before we roll Favro out to your studio. So building those collections building those dashboard collections, creating the workflow rules and restrictions for each one of the teams specific to those teams ahead of time to help get that ball rolling and make that transition to this new tool so much easier. Part of that too is also integrating with your other critical studio applications. You know, Favro has pre-built integrations, native integrations with Slack, Jira, GitHub, G Suite, many more. So we set up those integrations for you, which is of course a big benefit of going with this quick start package. We'll also help you migrate your data from existing tools, whatever those existing tools might be, into Favro. There's also this Favro Platform Master training and certification included, which it's up to 9 people. Soup to nuts, it's designed as a train the trainer, so you get your internal champions fully up to speed on all of the power of Favro from an administration, from a best practices standpoint, so that they can then go and train the rest of the studio on the tool. Again, not a ton of training needed, but that's definitely going to help get you started in the right direction. There's also some end user onboarding included when you actually do your launch. Here's kind of the full schedule of how things are broken down. We have a kickoff meeting, we do the design, the integrations, the migrations. There's a full communication plan to the entire studio and studio leadership throughout the whole thing. 2 days of training, then the launch, and there's success tracking and metrics built into this so you can actually see, are you getting the remote adoption of Favro that you had hoped that you intended to have, and how can that be improved? Okay, and that is it. Thank you everyone very much for attending. Again, when I send this out, I'm going to have all of the questions posted in this Q&A board so you can actually see any questions that have come up from past webinars, the answers, and access those again at your leisure. But I will now open it up to questions. Patrick, have we received any questions while I was speaking?
I have a one comment based on what you were showing, and there's also one one question that has come in from the side here. Sort of when you were showing the pipeline for recruitment, that's something that we used quite a lot ourselves at Favro. And what's nice with that is that when you work with, for example, recruitment agents, it becomes more like you're one team working together with recruitment instead of feeling like throwing things over the wall. But the comment I really want to make is that we do a very similar thing for onboarding, and we've done recruitment after Corona hit, which means that we've been doing recruitment and onboarding in a fully online fashion. We haven't had a single face-to-face meeting throughout the whole onboarding. And what's interesting is that I have to say that I think onboarding is one of those things where I don't think we executed as well as I would have liked in the past. And the onboardings we have done now are the best ones ever. So that's because we've really been thinking about this. Like, okay, now we really have to do this properly, and we basically using backlogs and a workflow in Favro for this. So that has been a great thing during these times. The question is to you, Matt. Some that are watching this are very senior themselves, but there's also people that are very new, and for someone who would like to work as a development director, producer, in a leadership role within production, what do you think is the best the best way to get into that, in terms of what to study, what experiences to try to get early, what kind of step-in jobs to try to get, so basically, if you want to pursue this career path, which is obviously becoming more and more interesting every year, what's your recommendation on how to do that?
Yeah, it's a common question. I have a couple of pieces of advice there. One is, it starts with being a gamer, being a passionate gamer yourself, really understanding the competition, the studios, the games, the types of games you want to make. A second piece of advice is that it's never been easier to be a game maker. It's never been easier to just download Unity and start playing around using the Unity store, you know, $10 to get you a couple of plugins to get your project up and running, and just start playing around and learning the tools and figuring it out, making your own independent project, joining some global game jams or local game jams or things like that. That's a great avenue as well to build up some experience before you actually start applying for jobs. And then, you know, the final piece of advice is to just get in the door any way you can. A lot of people in our production roles, the president of our division started as a QA tester, and that's a very common story. I came in through marketing as a marketing assistant, helping getting the Command & Conquer TV off the ground. So just get your foot in the door in whichever way you can, but then don't waste the opportunity once you're inside that space. Seek out mentors from within the company, speak with them frequently, set some career development goals, and try and transition into that dev team role that you want.
All right, awesome. And you know, John, I think we've been pretty good with time today. You know, so we're getting better and better at this too.
Nice, good work.
I think this is our 5th try. Get it down. Well, I think we're good. Thank you very much, Matt, again, for joining us. And Patrick, thank you very much. And again, as we mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, this should be up and online. The recording should be up and online, at least by early next week. And we'll be sending a series of emails to the registered people and attendees with all the links and information related to everything we talked about today. So again, thanks very much. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.